Hello and welcome back to our series Making the Cut on cutover planning. Today we are going to be talking about clinical cutover, and we have a special treat in that one of our clients, Gail Boushley, is here. She is the team leader for training and optimization from Bellin Health, and she is joined by Megan Rice, who is a practice director at Nordic. I'm John Pollard, part of the marketing team here at Nordic, and I think we're going to have a great conversation. Gail, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
At the time when we went live with Epic, I was a manager of an inpatient unit and also the operational lead for the Epic implementation. I've been a nurse now for 30 years, so I have a long-standing clinical background.
Sounds like we picked the right person to be part of this series. Megan, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Megan Rice, and
you're not a nurse.
I'm not a nurse. I would not even get close to thinking I was one. But I have an Epic background. I was a consultant with Bellin and worked on Gail's team as a ClinDoc application lead for the team here, and I am currently the practice director over Nordic's inpatient consultants.
Excellent. Well, let's just dig in. During this series, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about the planning ahead of time. We're going to talk about what happens during the cutover, and then we'll talk about what happens after the cutover. Now, as it relates to planning, when we're looking at our resource requirements, who should be involved in the planning?
A number of people. First and foremost are your subject matter experts or super users. Those are people who are going to be using the program. They're nurses, could be therapists, any discipline in the acute arena that we'll be documenting should be included in that process. I work closely with the CNO, who was our champion for the acute side, and we had project managers and all of our analysts. So we were a very large, cohesive team with everyone having good input into it.
Why is it so important to have such a diverse group of people?
It is really important to get the clinician's point of view, as they are the end user. And the work that we're doing in creating this documentation for them is really to make their, not only their life easier, but making sure that they're able to provide safe patient care to the patient. They know their work the best, they know what they need to do, what's required, and they can give us the most clear indication if it's not going to work or if it's going to work and make it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say too that in the planning for the whole cutover event, of course there were many different meetings that we had kind of preparing for what it would look like, how do we do training for this, how do we prepare the staff, and so Gail was one of a few different leaders that was involved in that planning, but it also, that group included folks from quality, from the pharmacy team, from the orders team, on the operational side, to really make some critical decisions about what content would get converted, according to what sequence, and to make sure that the organization was ready for what was going to happen, because there were a lot of moving parts up until that point.
Right. We came from a system that was, nursing was typically the one that was on the electronic medical record, and our physicians, up until June 12th, was on paper. They did everything on paper. So we had to take two different systems and bring it together into one. So it was quite challenging to be able to do that.
That sounds like a big challenge and quite a change. We'll address that later. But let's talk about just timing. How far in advance do we need to start getting all these people together?
The people that we got together actually started 2 years before we went live.
2 years.
We did a lot of work with our workflows, making sure that our current workflow went into the system well, and if there were improvements that Epic's build could offer us, we had validation of those changes. So we did a lot of preparatory work, and I think that was one of our key initiatives to our success, was that we did a lot of planning in the front, so that when we went live, it seemed rather seamless for the staff.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing when we went live. So that pre-planning is really critical. Getting those staff members who do the work, getting them involved straight up in the very beginning is critical. And we've been using those same people 3 years after go live.
Yeah. And for the cutover, the clinical cutover piece specifically, we probably spent a few months before go live. So Bellin went live in June of 2012, and a few months before that, we had started getting together as a group to talk about how was this event going to happen. So right before you flip the switch to Epic, how are you going to get a group of super users to get onto the floors where all these patients are for the night of the go live, to get them prepared for converting some of the clinical information that was in their legacy system or on paper into Epic. So we met probably weekly or sometimes multiple times a week to plan for that, and started pulling people in obviously a few weeks closer to the go live once they had, everyone was fully trained on Epic by that point because they were super users that were involved, but up until the week of go live, we were preparing people for how that event was going to happen.
How did you figure out though, like the 3 months thing? Like, you know this go live is coming, and how do you sort of what do you base your decision on to start those conversations when you start nearing in?
Yeah. I mean, from a project management standpoint, I think Epic does a really good job of preparing, clients that are going to be going live on Epic for the first time with the methodology and a project plan around that. So my role as an application lead with Bellin was to make sure that we were following that plan. I did speak with some folks from Epic as well from an advising standpoint, but having had experience with this before, kind of knew that with the size that Bellin is and the number of units that we were going to be converting, that we needed to get some pretty key players in to make decisions on the clinical content that was going to be converted, which patients, and we actually had to mobilize other clinicians like the pharmacists well in advance to make sure that they were going to be available the night of cutover to enter medications and things like that. So part of it is, basic methodology, but also understanding the organization and how much time they need to adapt to the change.
Okay. So as it relates to the actual cutover, in the cutover event itself, who should be involved in that?
Well, you need to involve nurse managers for any of the departments or other departments such as pharmacy, the ADT staff, well in advance in getting those people off their work schedule. Because we're talking, it's the middle of the night, so we need to be sure that they're well rested, clear mind when they're coming in. So, and in healthcare, you usually schedule out 2 to 3 months worth of schedule. So we really needed to be sure that the people we identified, we had their manager's commitment that they would be off and allowed the appropriate time. Our CNO was a huge player in making sure that everyone throughout our organization at leadership level knew what was going on, what to expect, made sure that they were supporting their teams as well.
Yeah, we had a couple, we kind of designated different roles in the cutover. So Gail played a really important role in the command center. We called her the command center lead, where she was kind of the conduit for all the different teams that were going to be doing the conversion itself, because we had different teams that were taking on different elements of the conversion. So Gail was really instrumental in that, and making sure that they had a one-stop shop for any issues that came up. We certainly had the super users who were on the floors doing the conversion at that time. We had different point people throughout the hospital as well that kind of served as the leads on each of those units. And certainly we had the IT staff in the command center in case any more technical issues came up. So, and then some of the other operational leaders, I think, too, from a quality standpoint and an HIM standpoint for any of the scanning that needed to happen of patient charts. Obviously, quality was really involved to make sure that patients were being safe throughout the whole conversion. And then folks to help monitor the downtime of the old system before we went live on Epic.
Right. Yeah, and making sure that you have the tools you need. We did a lot of preparation ahead for downtime forms, which we use today if we do end up in a downtime, and that can happen. So we were using paper tools developed based on the Epic build, so that if we had an admission in the middle of this downtime, we then could convert that over really quickly into that patient's new record. So that was important to make sure you have the tools that staff need. We provided a checklist to all of the nursing departments so they knew what to do when and who they could contact, which was me, on the Vocera, or they could call on the phone and say, I'm running into a problem, and we'd get somebody out there.
So Vocera were these really cool, like walkie-talkie little necklaces that,
A little bit of
yeah, over and out.
break one
sort
down.
of.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was great because as the teams were moving across the different departments, they could Vocera us and say, we're done on the med-surg unit, we're going to head over to pediatrics or whatever.
So as it relates to that team then, how did you decide on that, structuring that team and the style of that team and how you're going to manage that team?
We sat down and really, Megan and I outlined what do we need to have in the new record. So that was the first part, and then identified who would be the appropriate people in entering that information. Making sure that we had people who are comfortable in the med rec piece, putting in medications, patients' medications, transferring information over from the Meditech, being able to go in there and look and see where that information is to bring it over into the record. So we wanted people who were very good in the old system that could quickly find it. And then the preparation work that the departments did by printing out some of those documents for us ahead of time also helped us. So, and then everyone that we had on that team identified their area they wanted to work with, and they were pretty excited about it. They'd been working really hard for 2 years. And I will tell you, food is always a good thing.
You heard it here. Food.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good bribery.
So one more question as it relates to resource requirements. What is the skill set that you need? And obviously they have these different roles that they're filling, but what about the skill set sort of needed for a conversion team member?
It isn't really a skill set as much as it is a desire to really make a difference for their peers. People who are passionate about teaching other staff members. It's that attitude of being positive, looking forward to it, is more impactful than it is the skill of being able to click a button. So you really need to look for people who really want to do it. If you're forcing someone to do it, it's not going to be successful. And we had a great team that has been dedicated the whole time and still to this day dedicated to making it better. So that is really the key. It is having the right attitude and desire.
Yeah, and I think the people that were involved from the get-go, I mean, this is a team that met every week for 8 hours every Thursday. They knew the workflows by this point, and they knew the impact of making sure that patient data was entered in Epic for the night of Go Live was going to be so instrumental for a smooth transition for their peers. But they were also technically savvy. I mean, these are people that if you're asking them to go out on the floor and enter a whole bunch of height, weight, and allergies and patient, reported meds, that they've learned the system well enough at this point that they can do it pretty swiftly, and they're going to do it accurately, because this is a major point in the implementation.
Right.
Excellent.